Muhammed Shehada is Chief of Communications at Euro-Mediterranean Human Rights Monitor. He joins us now from Copenhagen to talk more about the humanitarian situation in Gaza. Mohammed, it's good to have you on this news hour. When we hear these stories of what's happening at Shifa and how bodies are having to be buried on the premises, it's difficult to fathom how and why there hasn't been more action from global leaders. It's one thing to call for something. It's completely different to actually take action to make Israel stop.
Precisely, and what's more disappointing is that we're not even seeing any calls for action in the first place. What we are seeing is these sort of statements that try to both side the issue, statements that would tell Israel has the right to defend itself, but in accordance with international law, which means absolutely nothing, because Israel will keep answering, of course we are in accordance with international law, no matter how well documented their atrocities and war crimes in Gaza have been. And European and American officials are easily dismissing any images of atrocities, suffering, brutalities that are being unfolding or that are being unleashed on Gaza by simply saying, it's collateral damage, or war is ugly, or saying, for instance, that, it's necessary, it's a necessary mean to an end. But the problem here that they don't see is that the people of Gaza are gonna be there no matter what after this war. And every person that had their homes destroyed and their families killed is gonna be a potential recruit for militant groups in the future based on the immense rage that is being created and the immense despair that will be impossible to treat, let alone all the severe mental damage before this operation or war started in Gaza. 71% of the population had symptoms of depression. Now the situation, as you mentioned, the humanitarian situation in the northern half of Gaza is beyond anything that a human mind can imagine in any conflict in the last 30 years at minimum. So basically, half of Gaza is now declared by Israel itself as, quote, a killing zone or a sterile zone. So in that northern half, no food, no water, no aid, no medicine, no electricity, no fuel is allowed in. The stench of death is everywhere. People are stuck in their homes and they have only one option: to leave to an overcrowded, disease-infested, heavily bombarded south, or stay home and get killed. People are unable to leave their homes, unable to access hospitals, unable to go anywhere. And even in the south, the humanitarian situation, I cannot even find words. Catastrophic is not even enough, because it takes people a whole day to get a few bottles of water and another whole day to just get a few loaves of bread. So it's insane that this can continue with European officials dismissing it by saying it's collateral damage, it's a necessary means to an end.
Mohammed, I'm wondering then if there was a truce for a few days, say for 5 days, do you think that this would make a significant impact on the humanitarian situation? And I'm talking maybe just southern Gaza at this stage, because as we've been hearing from our correspondents, there's practically no aid getting to the north anyway at this stage.
Yeah, and aid even in the south is not distributed evenly. There are a lot of problems of access in the allegedly safe south. So basically, I think a humanitarian temporary ceasefire is absolutely vital to at least prevent an impending disaster. We receive and document a lot of reports from the south where people are unable to go to a hospital but suffering from food poisoning or water poisoning and being bedridden for days. Today we received a lot of reports and documentation of the miserable and dire situation in these tent shanty towns and tent cities, because it's very improvised with basically bed sheets and blankets, and rain has been pouring down that it got completely flooded, with people having no clothes or nothing left to protect themselves from the cold. So a humanitarian pause is important, but it's very vital, but it's not the end. It's not enough. At the same time, it's important, a humanitarian temporary ceasefire is important to reach some sort of deal or understanding to release the Israeli hostages in Gaza, because the bombardment is making that task practically impossible.
Mohammed, I just want to end by quoting Richard Falk, who is from he's the chairman of your board of trustees and worked for a long time with the United Nations. And his quote is, "It is important to continue the struggle despite frustrations and disappointment based on an ultimate faith in the triumph of justice." What does justice look like for the Palestinian people?
Well, that would require a long answer. At very minimum, to be treated as equal human beings deserving of respect, dignity, and freedom, to have the most basic, most minimal rights, which before October 7th, they were deprived of it completely. Gaza was an unlivable death zone where people are just basically caged there to die slowly. Now the war is just expediting and fastening that process of killing and death. But before October 7th, it was basically a death zone. So basically, justice in that sense, it requires to give Palestinians the most minimal basic rights, and it requires to serve accountability for the atrocities that have been committed. But as I said, European and American officials, no matter how much we describe the sufferings to them, I was last night on a phone call with a top European official. No matter how much I describe the suffering, the atrocities, the brutalities, the end of it, he would say, yeah, it's ugly, but war is ugly. This is collateral damage. And they would even go a step further, saying, yeah, Hamas is responsible for all of this. Well, Hamas is not the one pressing a button to drop a precision-guided bomb on a school or a refugee shelter or a Jabalia refugee camp or a home.
Yeah,
So
Mohammed.
that sort of cognitive dissonance is very guilty.
Yeah, Muhammed Shehada, it's been really good to speak to you and get your analysis live there from Copenhagen. Thank you so much.